As many of you realize, George Martin's series is about to come to an end on TV, even though the book series is well from it. And we've handled a lot of topics of it, but there's one more I think we should. And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is The War Between the Living and the Dead. Now, George R. R. Martin has a habit of making things a little impossible to decode, but he's not the only one. Way back when, I compared him to J. Michael Straczynski, and I specifically compared in why we tell war stories to the Shadow War. And there is something interesting about the tale of these two dead men who walked out in the middle of nowhere to save the world. And of course, there's the fact that they've been called Firewights. Now, In Deep Geek did an entire great video that hopefully I remember to link in the description below, because he goes way more in depth into the hows and what it probably means. But I also did a thing about memories and how our memories are what make us who we are, specifically how we handle things. Now, in the question of nature versus nurture, how you're raised compared to what you're predetermined, I've recently been told by a documentary that there's a lot more nature to this than I originally thought. These triplets were separated at birth, and believe it or not, turned out remarkably the same, even though they went through different conditions.
He's got all
So,
these scars. He's becoming
when we look at
more
John,
and
when we
more
look at Derek,
physically
when we look at
hideous
Stoneheart,
because he's not a living
we
human
look at the fact
being
that
anymore. His
they're
heart
losing a little
isn't
bit of their
beating.
memories.
His blood
They're
isn't
losing a
flowing
little
in
bit
his
of what makes
veins.
them them.
He's a white,
But
a white
I'm betting that
animated by
Martin knows
fire
as much as I
instead
do, if
of by
not more,
ice.
because,
So-
well, he's a well-researched writer. So when we look at how a white is a dead thing, animated by ice, and that maybe, just maybe, there are other creatures out there that are capable of animating some form of human intelligence, well, then we look at the fact that these two came back from the dead using fire magic. Did they lose a piece of themselves? Well, Derek definitely says so in the books and in the show. John, we haven't really seen much to say one way or the other yet, and the show doesn't go quite as in-depth as, say, the book does. I'm sure that when, not if, John comes back in the books, we're going to see. So does that mean that we're fighting a war, dead men versus dead men? Whites versus white, just fire white versus ice white? Because at the end of the day, isn't there another type of white out there? For lack of a better term, a science white? Now, In Deep Geek has this whole theory that Qyburn has, in some way, shape, or form, touched on some significant ability, some significant thing that others have already tapped into mystically, but he's done it through the scientific method. Remember, in the House of Black and White, they may not be using magic to animate the dead, but they are using some form of magic, alchemy, something, to maintain the dead skin and use it as a mask. And it's not just any mask. I mean, this is full on, Mission Impossible, rip off the mask and I'm someone else of a different height and weight, and there's no possible way a mask could possibly have just made that change. This isn't just tricks of makeup, although I'm sure that that's in there too. And the fact is that in the House of Black and White, we see Arya being influenced by memories of those dead faces. So if she can be influenced by a memory of a dead, and we know that John's memories are still mostly intact and Barrick's memories are at least somewhat intact, that means that Qyburn might be onto something. In the books, I think in the show, but I'm not 100%, but in the books I'm 100% sure. He says this whole thing about, I came into a room at the Citadel, and when I did, I knew that a woman was there a moment before me. The seat was still warm and still had her impression, and I could still smell her perfume on the air. If we leave such a lingering trace of ourselves when our body leaves, should not our soul? Okay, well, I don't know what your religious beliefs are, whoever's listening to this, but whether you have a soul or not doesn't really matter, because your mind, your memories, what makes you you, might leave an imprint as well. maybe an imprint that some unscrupulous necromancer could use. And now I'm going to just quickly dovetail for a second into the fact that in the show we also have this scene where Qyburn is paying attention to that white hand, and nothing good, just trust me on this, nothing good comes from him having more study resources. Because we've already seen an undead mountain that may be a science white. Can you imagine what happens when we give him more stuff to study? And that, of course, brings up Melisandre. Is she a fire white, or is she just some long-lived fire mystic? And then we go to the theory that In Deep Geek specifically posts that Jon and this guy are both different sides of the same coin. That they're both Jon Snows, they're both bastards of Winterfell, and that maybe, just maybe, they're going to fight each other specifically because they're calling out to each other. Now, there's a lot going on with the Azor Ahai prophecy, but at the end of the day, the two generals, the two people we most want to see fight, the one that I cheered when he finally proved that Valyrian steel could kill one of the others, are both dead men, reanimated through magic. They're both losing some piece of themselves. They're both weapons being used in a long-forgotten war. And I touched on this in my other video where I said why we tell war stories. We tell war stories specifically because war is horrible, and we want people to know not to go to war unless you absolutely have to. And I'm not one of those people that says there's never a reason to go to war. There is. And if ever there was a reason to go to war, this guy is the reason. I mean, this guy is the end of everything. But at the end of the day, is he really? What do we really know about what's going on? What do we know about any of this? Very little. All through point of view of a handful of characters. And all through these two. Now, there's someone else that I want to bring up in here. Someone who's not quite a dead man like these two. But someone whose life was altered radically when something happened that may or may not have been manipulated by someone. Because you see, this guy has some powers in common with a certain little someone that we've seen him interact with already. This is the war between the living and the dead, because this is the guy who's still alive fighting war. Then again, not all living people are good guys in this either. Let's not make any bones about this. In the books he's worse, but in the show he's still a bad guy. And that's before you even account Ramsay. So is this a battle of light versus darkness? Is this that team good guys are all going to get together and beat team bad guys? Oh, come on, this isn't the Mortal Kombat end. No, there's a lot more nuance to this. But more than this guy had to say, my favorite Onion Knight kind of misses the point too. Because he misses the point that some of the dead men are good guys, and some of the living guys are bad guys. And at the end of the day, those petty squabbles might be unimportant. But some of them are kind of important. And what happens when the dead come in March? What happens when the wall falls? What happens when the new season starts very soon? My first prediction for what's going to happen is that no one will be happy. And I don't just mean on the show. I mean, like, off the show. People are just going to be pissy that it's not like the books, that it's not as in-depth. But I'm also betting that this whole thing comes into play at least a little bit in the show and a lot in A Dream for Spring once we finally get to it. I honestly think that the idea of nature versus nurture, what your memories mean, what it means to be alive, what it means to be a white, will play an important part in understanding the White Walkers. Because I still believe that asking the question who they are and what they really want is important. And now, having said that, I'm also sure that HBO is going to have a massive, awesome dragon throwdown with zombies. But that might not be the way the book series ends. We're going to have to wait and see. So for now, let me give a big shout-out thank you to In Deep Geek for kind of sparring this on in my head. And of course, now would be a great time for me to remind you that the entire reason we tell stories in general is because we're teaching lessons. We're showcasing what it means to be. And because of that, I think that, be it the action-packed ending that's going to be HBO, or the book ending that'll be more psychological, Either way, it's going to be awesome. But I'm curious what you think, especially before the new season starts. Do you have any predictions? Anything you want me to comment on during the episodes? Let me know down below. And of course, this is the time when all YouTubers ask you to like and share their video, and then give a big shout out to their Patreons, those that help make this channel possible. If you'd like to help out, you can of course join our community by subscribing, or just leave a little comment. Like I said, I will address any comments that are left on this video in the first couple of episode video reviews. For now, though, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Are they fire wights? Isn't the important question. The important question is, what do they lose for being fire wights? I hope you have a good night, and thanks for watching.